being a good employee or being a leader, the key is to use the data that you have to just educate that executive on the decision that they're making. Because if they see it through that lens, they may determine that it does not make sense to do that. But otherwise, they're trying to just reduce overhead just to be able to kind of see the playing field longer.
I'm thrilled today to have our guest, Grayson Lafrenz, on our podcast here today. Grayson is founder and CEO of Power Digital. Grayson, it's great to have you on board.
Great to be here with you, Jason. Appreciate you having me and excited to chat with you.
Great. And for our listeners, maybe you can say a bit about Power Digital, what you guys do, what your focus is.
Yeah, so Power Digital is a tech-enabled service business, and the technology platform is called Nova, and it sits at the core of everything we do. But at its core, it's a first-party data platform that gives us a real advantage to determine where brands can experience growth, where they can scale further, where their strategy lacks or execution lacks, et cetera. But our revenue model is performance marketing services. So we work with leading brands to help them drive better, more qualified traffic, convert that traffic at a higher clip, and then take their best audiences and further monetize them and attract more customers that have the highest lifetime value.
Got it. Well, that's certainly relevant, to marketers today. And Grayson, I understand you guys are operating at some real scale. How big is the team these days?
Yeah, I think we just broke 600 employees. So we're really lucky, 600 team members throughout the country. And then we have offices in San Diego and New York City and DC. But obviously these days people work from whatever makes them happiest. So very lucky to have the team all over the country and get to pick the best talent from all the different markets.
Got it. No, that's great. And I can't help but notice the beautiful surfboard over your right shoulder. Hopefully you still get time out to hit the waves.
Yeah, every now and then. That was actually a client gift, I think, from the second client we ever had. So it used to be on the wall at our office. I'm working from home right now in San Diego, but we bashed through that wall many years ago. So I snagged it, and it's a good conversation starter always.
Got it. Great. So I'm really excited for our conversation today. For our listeners, obviously Grayson with the scale and scope of Power Digital, coupled with his focus around first-party data and activation. You're really excited to dig in. We were talking the other day around really what's happening in the market. Are we in a recession? We're certainly now officially in a bear market. With this really just comes changes to how CMOs all the way down to marketing managers really just need to rethink some of their strategies. And with this, we wanted to focus today on how these changes are just impacting marketing, impacting budgets, impacting strategies, and how really we're seeing that more broadly across brands of all shapes and sizes. Grayson, maybe we'll just sort of start at the top. And no pun intended, or maybe every pun intended. Because 6 months ago, the name of the game was all around top line revenue. For many brands, it was growth at all costs. It was how can you get that land share of customers and define what you're doing. We've on Simon's side have certainly seen a shift here to a bit more of approach around the bottom line, broader business goals and directives. But what are you seeing across your customers, and how are CMOs and marketing teams responding to this, and how are goals have impacted?
Yeah, you're spot on, and it's wild. I mean, it's wild how different the environment, the economy. I don't even know if I would say it's the economy yet, but just the way that businesses are operating is very different today than it was even 3 months ago. And to me, it reminds me a lot actually of the first couple of months of COVID to some extent, where I think for a lot of businesses, I don't know that they've necessarily felt a decline in business as much as they're hearing the news cycle and there's a lot of fear over what's coming. And so I think that unknown and uncertainty causes CEOs to really look at their P&Ls and balance sheets and get more conservative. So I think one thing we're seeing, and it's interesting because we do this with our own business, is you go into your P&L and you sort by your highest monthly expenses down, and you start to really scrutinize and evaluate and say, what is mission critical right now, or what can we put a pause or a hold on to just stockpile as much cash as we can and see how things kind of settle. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think for marketers, it's a really good reminder. And so whether you work in-house at a brand, or you're a CMO, or you're on the agency side, I think you'll see a lot of pulling back on budgets, but not always through the lens of data. And what I mean by that is a lot of CEOs are going to go and say, what could we cut that maybe we don't think on the surface drives value today? It doesn't mean that it doesn't drive value on the surface today. And so I think, being a good employee or being a leader, the key is to use the data that you have to just educate that executive on the decision that they're making. Because if they see it through that lens, they may determine that it does not make sense to do that. But otherwise, they're trying to just reduce overhead just to be able to kind of see the playing field longer. So that's the first thing. And I think it's a great opportunity for talent to really stand out. And I think most executives, and especially if you're in a good company culture, they're going to value a little bit of pushback and friction on a decision that on the surface maybe makes sense, but when you look deeper at the data, maybe does not. So I think it's represents a good opportunity there. I think the other challenge that we've seen, especially with e-commerce brands, is Facebook has been very problematic. And that's not a new thing. It happened about a year ago, about this time a year ago, where the data privacy changes really rolled out. But where we've seen it start to hit a lot harder is probably over the last 4 months. And I think it's just the number of people that are opting out of tracking and things of that nature. But the challenge there is twofold. One is there's a lot of brands out there that you would know that have created these Pareto customer situations for themselves with Facebook. So just like in my business or in your business, you want to look at your customer base and you don't want to have a huge percentage of your revenue tied to one customer, because if you lose that customer, it can cause big problems. It can cause job security issues for employees. It can cause major setbacks financially. Well, we've seen a lot of brands that have done that with Facebook. So it's such a big part of their customer acquisition funnel. And it's been so good to them for so long that they didn't test enough and diversify to get a more healthy channel mix. And so as the efficiencies in Facebook have had some decline, it's caused panic for some of those brands and it's forced them to now diversify. So I think that's another really important thing to look at, not just with Facebook, but just across your whole funnel, and make sure that you're cautious. And then the last thing I'll say before I pass it back to you and stop talking for so long on your question is also a mistake that we see businesses typically make when the market gets tough, same situation in COVID as right now, is they start to really focus on efficiency, just like you said. So less top line, more efficiency. And that can be really risky because sometimes on the advertising side, what we see is they just start beating their current lists. And so they start expediting the next order, and it spikes efficiency and revenue for the time being, but that shoe will drop at some point. And so I think it's more important than ever that brands are really smart and methodical about looking at how they're acquiring new customers and that cost and what they're willing to pay, but also the efficiency side. And we see too many brands that we believe kind of quickly lean into hammering the current lists. And we think that's a pretty short-sighted move and can lead to some major problems in a few months down the road.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's super interesting, sort of reflecting on, and hearing sort of speak about some of the changes that we're seeing. We certainly see this across our customers. We're certainly asking these questions assignment data as well. And it really, in some sense, serves as a forcing function to ask some of the hard questions that maybe you didn't ask before. I really love the point you made around individuals and really taking data to the next level, and how this is really an opportunity for folks to really at all levels of the organization to step forward, to be more data driven, to take ownership around the outcomes of what they're doing on a daily basis, and to really both ask and demonstrate whether the work that they're doing justify from a business perspective. And by the way, if it's not working, even just the act of demonstrating or having that conversation that maybe we haven't had in the last 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, bring that to the forefront. I think it's a real opportunity for everyone to really level up where they are, level up the business, and really just to have kumbaya moment where we all come together and ask, are we making the right investments? Going into Facebook, I think it's it's very interesting just around business continuity. And we've certainly seen, we grew up in the era in New York City with a tremendous number of vertically integrated brands, direct to consumer across eyewear, across contact lenses, across dog and cat food and everything at all. And some of these brands really just were built on the backs of Facebook. And there's so many ninjas that we've sort of worked with across our customer base. We just understand the ecosystem tremendously well. But for whatever reason, market conditions, changes around third-party data, changes to Facebook's algorithms, changes to consumer behaviors, the efficacy we're seeing in Facebook has changed over the last several quarters. And that in some sense is almost independent of some of the market changes, right? And then you layer in the market changes on top of this, and suddenly we're in this exact situation where you sort of have this like imperfect storm or perfect storm, if you will, that really aligns the challenges that folks are having with Facebook, and then the market pressures around cost and business continuity relative to acquiring them efficiently, and then also being completely dependent on them during these difficult times.
Yeah, totally. And one of the interesting things with Facebook is I think there's definitely some loss of like efficiency from that channel, from that advertising channel. But the interesting thing is a lot of it is just attribution versus contribution and how brands think about attribution. And a lot of brands are trained to work off of a last click attribution basis. And that's what they're used to. And some of the most common analytics platforms that you use kind of default to that, Google Analytics, et cetera. But when we did a pretty in-depth study on the impact of Facebook ads, and what we found is that it's actually it has over 3 times as much revenue impact as what is reported in the last click attribution engine. And so that's the other kind of educational challenge that's required, is that gap and delta wasn't as big in the past, and it's much bigger now. And so part of it also is, being able to make that point with the right folks on the brand side and prove that to them. And so I think on top of all things, that's the challenge. And then I also think the next couple of months will be really interesting, because what we typically see is some big seasonality for especially e-commerce businesses during the summer. And there's heightened travel and things like that. And so this summer will be really interesting to see how that shakes out, because one would think that there'll be a lot of travel with this kind of pent up demand where people haven't been able to do that as much because of COVID and that type of thing. So I think when you talk about a perfect storm between the changes on Facebook, the economic news and the economic news cycle, seasonality that's coming down the pipe, I think we're going to see a lot of people play it very safe and try to be very conservative, over the next 3 to 4 months specifically.
Yeah, no, and getting back to the point you made around data and measurement, there's the adage in marketing that you only know, that half of your marketing budget is working, but have no idea which half. I always look at that as complete bullshit as a data guy by trade, and I think it's times like this, when analyses that like what you just described will force folks to really look a lot more closely to what's driving what, and develop a much more articulated perspective on what's actually driving revenue.
For sure. And I think even just simple things that brands can do on some of the more top of funnel channels, like incrementality testing and isolating different factors to see lift, is something that all brands, regardless of size, can be doing. And one of the things that's always concerned me a little bit with some of the data privacy changes is I think it tends to tip the scale to the advantage of big business. And I don't think that's the intention of it. And I think one of the really neat things about the internet and internet businesses over the last 5-10 years is that it's really encouraged entrepreneurship and removed those barriers. And the playing field has been more level than ever for a startup versus a player that's been in the space for a long time. In fact, I'd say sometimes those startups had more speed, more velocity, more ability to take chances and be a little edgier and stand out. But as first party data, obviously, it's becoming more and more critical, just because the quality and access to other data sources is going to continue to diminish. To me, that drives the biggest advantage to the big companies that have massive amounts of first party data and have the ability from a financial perspective to scale those teams, to invest in great partners, to invest in great technology. And so that's going to be interesting to see as well, because I think the political leaders and people that ultimately were part of why this occurred, they want to see small business growth and they want to see entrepreneurship growth, because it's always been the lifeblood of our economy. But these changes feel risky to me in kind of disrupting what I think was a big advantage for startups and small businesses and challenger brands, and kind of puts the power back into the big corporation.
Yeah, no, and it is a difficult situation, because one thing that we certainly see broadly across the market is even for smaller brands who do have data, using it and having the right technology, platforms, people, and systems in place to actually drive value from that is a whole nother challenge on top of this. that coupled with the fact that, a recession by nature always impacts the smaller guys because they don't have the reserves to operate for years and years on end at a loss. Whereas the mega corporations can make insane bets around the metaverse, and really have no huge concerns whether it takes off next quarter or next year.
For sure. No, I agree. And I think right now too, for the listeners, again, these times are the times that you can really stand out and differentiate yourself. And so I think even for the marketing teams that are working on a brand, it's a good time to move from just that pure marketing focus to a little bit more business intelligence. And so I think things that brands should be looking at in these times is things like conversion paths and what products are most efficiently converting new customers, and really focusing on that profitability angle. And I think, to your point, one of the biggest things that we see, it frustrates me within our business and with our leadership team, but I see it with entrepreneurs, I see it with clients, is a lot of times it's not necessarily that they lack the data or data integrity, but oftentimes that they don't know the action that the data is telling them to do. And then they don't measure that action well if they do. And so to me right now, us as a company, practicing what we preach, we're really looking with a fine-tooth comb at every single leading indicator within our business that really predicts what next month will be like and the next month and the next. And we're saying not only what is the trend that it's telling us, but what are the more concerning trends there? And then what could we do that's going to be very different, that can drive a different result from what we're seeing in that leading indicator? And so I think every brand should be looking at that, and more than ever should be really focused on those leading indicators and that predict future financial performance, because the longer you wait to do that, or I guess the better that you are with that, the longer you could wait to make certain hard decisions. And also the earlier you can make moves on some of these opportunities. And there should be a lot of market consolidation across the board in, the type of economy that's being talked about. And those that make it through and stay strong, they may see, lower profit margins for a period of time, but that's when you can come out and really take market share and dominate. And so I think thinking of it as that opportunity and taking it serious and being more data driven, really focusing on that finance and looking through the front windshield is the best thing that we could all be doing in a time like this.
I couldn't agree more with that. I actually founded my previous startup during the 2008 financial crisis. We signed a term sheet. I think we just closed financing right before the market started to crash. I was actually reading up on exactly some of the details because it's been 13 years over the weekend. I think the market's lost 50% of their value relative to an 18-month period prior by 2009. So we're down 20% now, 20 something, maybe low 21 or something around there. I don't know exactly, but we're nowhere near 50%. So it's hard to reflect back there. But at the end of the day, we looked at the situation. We had money in the bank. We had a great vision. We had a great product, and we had a great strategy, and we just executed. And ultimately, folks who can put their heads down, really doubling down on the bare minimum, that defines what you're doing, the elements of the strategy that are essential. While at face value, seems really hard. Everyone is going through the same challenges, and it can really play to your advantage if executed properly.
For sure. And I also think it's a smart time for businesses to look at their forecast for the year and their goals and determine, is that still viable? Hopefully it is, and you go after it. It's not to say you're not going to go after it fully regardless, but it is a good time to reforecast to some extent and just to make sure that you still have that clear path there. Because I think in these down years, and I'm not saying that this year will be one of them, but if you think back to, when you started your last company, at those times, if you're a business that has scale, if you're flat year over year, you're looking really good, and that you're going to come out of this thing real clean. If you're up at all year over year, that's super positive. So I think it's a great time for companies to become more valuable. And I've seen it in our business. There's areas that we probably got a little fat and bloated over the last 3 years, just because you're growing like crazy, you're moving fast. It's not that you're doing it intentionally. You're just not operating as tight as you can when you're having major growth. And so to some extent, COVID did the same thing for us. It forces you to go back to the fundamentals of running a really great, profitable business and not investing in areas that don't require it, or doing it earlier to where you lose efficiency because of it. So I think for us, we started these exercises at the beginning of the year as we felt like something was coming. And, we're looking at the numbers, and we're looking at those leading indicators and models every week as an executive team. And it gives us a lot of comfort in where we're going. And, we feel that from a lot of factors, it's going to be a great thing. But I also think diversifying customer base has a lot of value in times like this, because there's going to be sectors that get hit harder than others. And then there's going to be sectors that actually win and excel through this period of time. Very much how I think e-commerce and consumer overall did through the thick of COVID, where it just forced a lot more demand, to the internet, and whether that's to the .com or to Amazon or other retailers. So those are the opportunities that, we're looking for, we're helping our clients look for. And I think for a lot of the audiences listening to this podcast, there's probably more opportunity today for you and your career, especially if you're ambitious, you want to be a CMO one day or an entrepreneur. Now is the time to really study what is going on and who's the winners and who's the losers, and get even closer to the goals and the data than you've ever been before.
Yep, no, 100%. And we're coming up on time here, Grayson. We have a new, brand new fun, part of the podcast that we were piloting with you. And the question is, if you were to sit down and have this conversation, with any CEO of any brand, who would it be and why?
A good question. Jokingly, I'd probably say Mark Zuckerberg. I want to learn what the plan is with the ad platform over at Facebook, and if they've bailed on that to put all their talent on bigger future projects. But more realistically, actually very lucky, because probably the person that I would have said months ago is actually Ben Kirshner, who is a board member for Power Digital. And so I get to pick his brain all the time. He was the founder of Elite SEM, which is the platform company that became Tenuity, who's a big competitor of ours. And so Ben just has been through these cycles. He's a little older than I am, and so he's gotten to navigate through multiple cycles and has been there and done that. And I think, a lot of people have made a lot of money over the last 10 years or so, and it's been pretty easy to do, whether in real estate or in other areas. But the people that have done it through multiple cycles, they just have an experience that you can't have if you haven't done it.
Got it. Well, that's a great answer. And I'm sure you feel blessed to have someone on your board who you would also answer this question around this topic, which is, so time pressing and critical for your business and, obviously all of our listeners. So that's super cool. Well, thanks, Grayson, for coming on to the episode today and sharing your wisdom with us. Really, when I reflect on the conversation, it's really about opportunity. I think this is, epitomizes the entrepreneurial spirit. And I think for many brands, especially smaller folks, this really represents a massive opportunity to further define what you're doing. Everything down from top line business strategy, down to the lowest level line item around your marketing budget. And I really was inspired by a lot of your advice and tips and sort of guidance. To really just use this opportunity, use the recession and certainly what seems like tremendously difficult times to be smarter, to be faster, to be more data driven, and for individuals to further your career and for businesses just to come out in a better place. And Grayson, for anyone who wants to learn more about Power Digital, where should they go?
Yeah, check out our website, powerdigital.com, or follow us and hit me up on LinkedIn or Instagram, and I would love to connect with you. And Jason, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It was great to get a chat with you and a real pleasure.
Likewise. And thank you to everyone listening to this episode of the Data Unlocked podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Simon Data, please visit us on the web at simondata.com or email us at hello@simondata.com.